If the American right wing were to get everything it wants, it would be a horrifying reality. If the left were to get everything it wants, we'd have to figure out a few things, including exactly how we pay for certain programs. But they're mostly noble goals. And I believe that they are more supportive of an individual self-determining what they want to do in life and how they want to live, and is more in line with the idea of freedom and liberty than what the right is currently proposing. That's my view.
In today's video, David Pakman absolutely destroys Lex Fridman in a heated debate on wokeism. Lex came in with the usual vague critiques. Wokeness has gone too far. Cancel culture is dangerous. You know the script. But Pakman wasn't buying the buzzwords. He calmly and surgically dismantled the narrative, asking for specifics, drawing the line between real social progress and manufactured outrage, and exposing how the term woke has basically become a lazy catch-all for anything conservatives don't like. While Lex was trying to be diplomatic and ask big questions, David made it clear. If you're more upset about people using the word Latinx than you are about voter suppression, police brutality, or anti-LGBTQ legislation, then maybe your priorities are a little out of whack. So let's dive in and watch how David Pakman shuts down Lex Fridman in this heated debate.
And of course, people will disagree with me. They'll say, no, we get to freedom and liberty the way that the right wants to do it. Okay, well, we can have that conversation.
So I think you've implied in your answer, it was kind of focused on policy. It felt like it was focused on policy. There's other stuff that people worry about.
Sure.
Particularly with the left, what may be termed the woke mind virus.
Right? Where have I heard? Who's using that term a lot now? I'm trying to think.
I'm not sure. Not sure where it comes up. But the cultural aspect of this,
sure,
that if you give a lot of power to people on the left, like as you gave as an example, there would be a lot of kind of censorship and suppression of speech and a kind of dividing up of a society of who's allowed to, basically a reallocation of resources, not based on merit, but based on some kind of high ethical notions of what is right. And only a very small percent of the population gets to decide what is fair, what is right. Which is,
we already have a small portion of the population
yes.
deciding fair. Okay.
Yes. But I don't know how many different ways I can say kind of a negative characterization of folks on the left when we're now comparing it, just as to play devil's advocate.
Sure.
So is that something that you worry about? So setting policies aside, wokeism.
Yes.
How big of a problem is it?
This is a great conversation. So let's two sides of it. Okay. We have new polling that seems to suggest so-called wokeism is kind of more popular in the United States than anti-wokeism. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. This is the less interesting part. We'll go to the more interesting part second. Sometimes what people mean by wokeism is an overreaction to a perceived injustice that goes beyond what would be fair and equitable. There was this really interesting poll, and it asked questions like, for example, do you believe society has gone too far, not far enough, or just about the right amount in dealing with issues affecting the trans community? The woke position, which is society hasn't gone far enough, was far more popular than we've gone too far. Now, the right-wing media narrative is we've gone way too far. This is out of control. And there are lots of other similar answers. It's not a huge margin. A lot of these are like 58 to 42, 60 to 40. It's not like 90 to 10. But by a small margin, the so-called woke perspective of we actually haven't yet done enough to fix some of these issues is a little bit more popular. So if we went back to DeSantis, this is part of why I think DeSantis's anti-woke agenda may just be a political misstep.
Now, David didn't dodge the tough stuff. He openly acknowledges he's a progressive and owns that bias, but what makes his arguments compelling is that he backs them up with facts and nuance. When Lex brought up the so-called woke mind virus and fears of censorship or overcorrection, David calmly dismantled the panic by pointing to actual polling. And David made an important distinction. Yeah, there are moments when the left overreaches, where the response to injustice might be clumsy or go too far. But those moments aren't nearly as dangerous as what the modern right is pushing. Book bans, anti-LGBTQ laws, voter suppression, and whitewashing history in schools. That's not a culture clash, that's legislation with real consequences. What really stood out was when David compared outcomes. If the left got everything it wanted, we'd be debating how to fund healthcare or education programs. If the far right got what it wanted, we'd see civil rights rolled back, identity erased from public discourse, and free speech weaponized against marginalized people. One of those outcomes is inconvenient. The other is just terrifying.
That's a really interesting result. I wonder how the questions are framed, but it's still interesting, nevertheless, no matter what, to hear that majority of people in America are woke, not in the negative sense of the word.
The poll didn't use the term woke.
Right.
Right. This is a critical thing.
Let's use the term woke positively.
The
here.
term has kind of been perverted.
Yes.
4 years ago, when the term was started to be used, I would have said, oh yeah, woke just means like I have become aware of problems that are bigger than any one person can fix for themselves that relate to the system. I think that's what, and we might disagree on which problems fall into that category, but like it was kind of benign. I think now it just means like outrageously left-wing, maybe even with socialist or Marxist undertones. It's become a pejorative at this
But
point.
also like bullies. Like
Bullies,
people,
sure. Censorers.
yeah, but people that go around calling others racist, oftentimes, without any proof of or justification.
Fair.
But that's a few folks on Twitter. You're saying, like the polling is starting to show that, like, no, there's still most of the Americans still care about these issues and want to improve, want to make progress.
I think that's the case, and they want to do it in a genuine way that doesn't suppress or oppress anybody. But now let me get to, like, to what degree do I think that when it goes too far is a problem? Mm-hmm. It absolutely exists. We can find instances of where this exists on the left. I've been told many times that as a Jewish Argentinian immigrant to the United States, I actually don't qualify as oppressed enough because Jews are privileged now in the US and my family had just enough money to leave Argentina. So there's this kind of like oppression Olympics thing where I've been told you don't get to comment. For example, like a topic in the Latino community now is, are you familiar with Latinx? Mm-hmm. Okay. In Spanish, there's an analogous movement where words by their nature sort of like have a gender. So like the word for friend is amigo. But if it's a woman, you would say amiga. So right from there, you can tell the gender that we're talking about. And if it's a mixed group, you say amigos. It's the male with an S, but it could include both. There's a movement now which wants to do away with that and put the letter E in. It's a new word, okay? It's a gender neutral word, amigues, totally new. I don't like that. And I don't know no one in my family uses it. And I think it's kind of like a strange imposition from someone kind of with a solution in search of a problem. I've been told, you moved to the US long ago and like your English is good and like you look white. And so like you don't get to weigh in on that. That I think is an example, if I understand correctly, of the type of thing you're talking about. I'm kind of being bullied. I'm fine. I'm surviving fine. But I'm being bullied over it and disqualified and saying you don't get to speak on this issue. All of that stuff, I am completely against. And I tell people on the left, we're actually hurting our own movement with this stuff. I just don't think it's as big as some others believe.
Lex came in with the now standard concerns, wokeness being used as a way to silence people, impose language changes, or disqualify others from conversations based on identity. These are the kinds of culture critiques you hear from center, right, or libertarian spaces, and to Lex's credit, he was genuinely curious, not combative. But David nailed it by cutting through the buzzwords and reminding us what this is really about. He pointed out that when you actually remove the word woke from the equation, because let's face it, it's been twisted into a political slur, and just ask people whether they believe we should do more to help marginalized communities, and most Americans agree. Polling shows that people overwhelmingly support trans rights, believe racism still exists, and think society hasn't gone far enough to address inequality. That's not radical, that's mainstream. David's take was solid. We can absolutely call out the overreach, the purity tests, the Twitter mobs, but let's not pretend that equals the entire progressive agenda. That agenda is about civil rights, equality, and making the world more fair, not about silencing people with different accents or fighting over invented words. And the truth is, the right is using these moments of left-wing excess to distract from actual policy attacks on LGBTQ rights, reproductive rights, and voting access. That's why Pakman's commentary matters. He's saying, yeah, let's clean up our side's messaging, but let's not lose sight of who's actually trying to ban books and roll back civil rights.
You don't think it's an existential threat to our civilization in the West, to Western
No, I don't.
civilization?
And I mean, look, we've got a Biden administration. I see Biden as center left. Those who see Biden as extreme far left, this stuff has played almost no role whatsoever in the first 2+ years of his administration.
Well, there's people that see him far left, as far left.
There's people on the right who, I mean, Trump says Biden's a Marxist, socialist, communist.
I haven't
some
heard
people-
that because I don't think that would stick very much. I
He
think
says it at every rally. Yeah. Which I'm
I
so
love how-
jealous that you don't watch these things.
I
It's
love
like,
how deeply researched you are in Trump. I can only imagine how good your Trump impression is at this point.
it's not very, sadly, it's not good.
It's not all right.
No, but, and I'll say one other thing on that. You know, take trans, because just to talk about it a little bit, we haven't dealt with it much. The trans issue has become huge, I believe, because the right is obsessed with it. The right is very much not concerned with gay men anymore. It used to be that gay men is like, oh, we have to stop gay men from adopting and unnatural and pedophiles. Now it's trans, it's drag shows, etc. I do think that there is a fair question to say, how do we deal with trans women in a very small, short list of sports? That's real, okay? My view, though, is I go, okay, we have all issues. We have issues related to gender and sexual orientation. We have issues related to trans. Within that, we have specifically sports. You can eliminate from that trans men. Nobody's worried, right, about women, biological women who are trans men. And then when you say it's only in certain sports that it matters, hey, I'm right there. I think it's a complicated question. I don't know how we deal with it. I would ask leagues that have experience with this already and whatever. The problem I have is pretending that the vanguard of left-wing politics right now is trying to force trans women into sports. It's like, it's just not the big issue that the right is reacting as if it were.
Now the conversation turned to trans issues, and again, Pakman handled it with clarity and honesty. He acknowledged the legitimate complexity of trans women in certain sports, which even many on the left admit is a nuanced issue. But he also called out the bigger picture. The right has created an obsession with the trans community that's completely out of proportion with reality. David made the smart distinction that you never hear in bad faith discourse. No one's worried about trans men in sports. The outrage is laser focused on trans women, often with little regard for actual athletic data, league policies, or the real life people being affected. And it's not like the progressive movement is being driven by sports policy. It's being driven by a push for basic dignity, healthcare, and legal protections for trans people. What Pakman really nailed was this: the idea that the left is somehow trying to force woke ideology on America is mostly a media creation. The vast majority of progressives are focused on things like healthcare, wages, education, climate change, and yes, treating marginalized people with respect. But the right hones in on culture war flashpoints like bathrooms, drag shows, and pronouns to distract from policies that actually matter. So while Lex brought good faith questions, it was David who kept the conversation grounded. He didn't deny nuance or complexity, but he reminded us that most of these existential threats are really just overblown talking points. And when you look at the data, the polling, and actual government action, it's clear. Wokeness isn't killing Western civilization, but fear-mongering about it just might kill real progress. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.